Today on Hampton Roads Business Weekly, making the transition from the military into business.
And managing growth. We look at the balance between building your company and the danger of spreading yourself too thin.
We have all this and more on Hampton Roads Business Weekly, starting right now. Hello and welcome to Hampton Roads Business Weekly, a look at the businesses and entrepreneurs making a difference in Hampton Roads. I'm Zack Miller.
And I'm Cheryl Tan. Today we're looking at growth and the danger of growing too fast. I spoke with Mike and Mark Klett of Kleck Consulting about their own unique growth strategy. We are here today with Mark and Mike Klett, the leaders of Kleck Consulting based in Virginia Beach. Thank you both for talking with us today.
Our pleasure.
And it is a big day. It's your 15th anniversary in business, Mark. So congratulations, and really we appreciate your time.
Thank you. No, it's a great day for us.
It really, really is. But I want to actually start because the beginning of your business was in your home, and I think it's so interesting. You had a no growth period. So can you talk a little bit about that and the theory behind that?
You know, when we first started, when I first had the idea of the business, putting my plan together, I started with 3 people. It was me, myself, and I. Okay, so there wasn't many arguments. But as the company evolved over the first 90 days, I wanted to have a no growth mandate for new employees. So they would go do their job exceptionally well and not worry about just do their job. And what ended up happening, our clients would come to us and say, I don't know where you found these people, but we need at least 1 or 2 more of them. And I'd say, okay, you know, and I tell our people every year, we do have this no growth mandate, but we are growing, and no one listens to me, but that's okay, but you're doing a great job. And we have grown over the years at a good pace, and now we're set up to, with our strategic plan launch, to grow from 30 to 35 to about 200 in the next 5 years.
Amazing. And so, as you were saying earlier, Mike, is that no growth plan is no longer. Things are different now.
Sure.
Since you've come into the company, it's all growth ahead.
Sure. So one of the byproducts of that no growth mandate, and this was not necessarily planned, but it was a great byproduct of it, was that it helped us to really focus on our foundation, and it helped us focus on our infrastructure and what we have from our processes internal to how we do our business development to how we do all of our planning and customer support. So we really got to focus on a small scale instead of growing too fast and outpacing ourselves. So because of that solid foundation and strong teamwork that we built internally, we're now positioned well to grow exponentially, and we're confident that we can do so.
So you're a consulting company, and very, very simply, because I know there are many services that you provide, you help companies become more efficient. How did you hone in on that specialty, and how is it that you help your clients get the result that they want to get?
Well, in the beginning, I'm a system engineer, so process modeling, and then that comes second nature to me.
Just you.
Yes. So I try to find the best people to fill those gaps that were vacant in the economy here, and we've gone not only from the local area but up to Washington, out to San Diego, down to Florida.
I would say that business owners who are watching want that kind of loyalty. How do you develop that? How do you find people on your team who are so passionate as you are?
People come first. You've got to take care of them first and foremost. Give them the best benefits. Be extremely competitive. Pay them well. Give them surprise bonuses when they do things that they don't think I even know about. All of a sudden, there's a change in their pay on a payday, and they are calling the office saying someone made a huge mistake, and then they end up having to talk to me, and I get to explain to them what a great job they did.
That's a nice meeting.
It's fantastic, and when we have people all over the country, they feel they're part of something special. And we try to do some very special things for our employees to incentivize them and motivate them on our, the profit sharing, and all. It's with everybody, everyone. And I'm one of the lower paid people in the company, and that's that's appropriate. It's fine because they do all the work in there, and I'm very proud of what they do. So.
What would you say for someone watching who's interested in growing a team and growing a business as you have? Maybe with this no growth in the beginning, but really ready and poised for growth in the end. What kind of advice would you give them?
I think it's preparation and people. So if you have the right people and you prepare accordingly, anything's possible. And I think if you focus on solidifying a core team of individuals who really have buy-in into your corporate culture, you can do anything.
And partnerships too. Partnerships with other companies that respect your capabilities and what you can bring to the table. I think that helps you to really grow and take off.
Well, congratulations on your first 15 years. Here's to another 15. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. No, we really appreciate it. And thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you.
The logistics behind merging a company with another company. It's next on Hampton Roads Business Weekly. Welcome back to Hampton Roads Business Weekly. We're here with part 2 of the merge of Array Digital, where Eric Olson of 80/20 formerly and ID Web Studios' Kevin Daisy, they realized that actually together they would become more powerful, kind of like Captain Planet, if you remember. I mean, right? You gotta do it in there. There you go. So we talked last week about kind of you guys agreeing that this was something that should be good for both you. But now let's talk about the meat and the potatoes, the really hard part of understanding, telling your teams, your families, the legal piece of it, the financial pieces of it. Like, what were the things that you did first in that kind of piece?
Probably the first thing that we did after we realized that this was a good idea is we wanted to validate that idea. So we started to talk to people that were very close to our businesses. And then next we took it to our individual teams. So I told our employees at 80/20 and Kevin told his employees at ID Web Studios. So for us, as programmers primarily back at 80/20, I had a concern that it was going to be a cultural fit to bring in other kinds of skill sets into the programming company. If you look at it by skills coming in versus just a merger. And the reason is in the programming industry, people are very specialized as far as what platforms they use, what tools they use, and the kind of work that they do. And some are actually very proud of the fact that they do a very, very narrow part of the whole spectrum that is required of a client.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a huge cultural clash that I was getting us into, and I was very pleased to find out that my concern was unfounded. Oh. So the team accepted it, thought it was a great idea.
What about the legal side of it? Like how much legal accounting, like that seems like a nightmare.
Yeah, well, it's challenging for sure. So we had no idea what we were doing from a legal standpoint. So we engaged our attorneys, Pierce McCoy, and they gave us a slew of options. There's a lot of different ways you can do this apparently. And so they gave us probably about 5 different options, and we talked about the pros and cons with the lawyers. And then we decided on an approach. They drafted all the paperwork. They gave it to us to proofread. We read it, provided some feedback, did another round of changes, and then we actually sat down in their boardroom and we did the signing one night.
What was the option that you finally went with?
So the option that we went with was both of our old companies are LLCs, but we file as S-Corps. Mm-hmm. And so the option was create a brand new entity. So you have ID Web Studios here, you have 80/20 here, and we created Array Digital LLC that is owned by the 2 S-Corps.
Right. Buys the assets of both. And
Exactly. There was an asset and a liability transfer between the 2 companies and Array Digital. And then we are technically not employees as the owners of the LLC. The companies are the owners of the Array Digital LLC. And then we are employees of those LLC/S-Corps at the lower level. So it's complicated, but we ran these options through accountants, lawyers, and that's the option that kept coming up as the best option.
So communicate a lot, hire people that understand this, and make sure it's a good thing at the end of the day. Do you guys still feel good about this today?
Nah, it's horrible. I wish we never did it. No, I mean,
We're breaking
been great.
we're breaking up after the show.
It's been great. There's certainly been some lessons learned. So For me, lesson learned number one was we signed the paperwork on a Monday evening.
Which is no joke, by the way. It's like buying 10 houses, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of
If
paperwork.
you're going to merge, make sure you're prepared.
But we signed the paperwork on Monday night, and then on Tuesday morning, we had a U-Haul that went to each of our offices and physically moved us from our old offices to a brand new office. So within the span of 2 days, we had a tremendous upheaval. The merger, getting staffs together, getting utilities turned on, all the things associated with
Brand new
everything.
building.
And it turned into about 2 months of chaos. It was difficult. So I would definitely recommend easing into the actual transition post-signing a little bit slower.
Great words of wisdom from Array Digital. Thank you guys for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What are some of the challenges in growing your business? We're going to talk about that with Joe Roomsburg, the owner of BRR Refrigeration, as well as the importance of staying in your lane, coming up on HR Business Weekly. We're talking about challenges to business growth today with Joe Roomsburg, the owner of BRR Refrigeration in Virginia Beach. Joe, thanks so much for talking with us about this topic.
Thanks for having me.
And when we're talking about growth, you've seen it over the last 17 years. You have 60 plus employees, but 17 years ago it was just you and your dad. So how did you get started in business?
I worked for another company and just had a desire to start my own business. Wanted to have a business that was different, you know, good for its employees. And so got the courage to go out and start as a single man show, and 17 years later, here I am.
I know it wasn't as easy in those years, and you've talked a little bit about growth spurts that you've had to manage. Talk a little bit about that as far as hiring when you needed to and having the infrastructure and the work to accommodate all of that.
Typically in this industry, I've learned that you don't hire when you need to. When you have good people or good employees coming in, you hire them.
When they're there,
Absolutely.
when they're right in front of you.
I've been very fortunate. The first 3 people I hired are still with me today.
Wow.
So I'm not sure how I managed that, but and just growing, we would grow and we hit like 20 employees, and then there's certain things that you have to do to manage that.
Sure.
Just like now today at 60 employees, there's certain things that do not work with 60 that worked at 20. And so just knowing your challenges. A big one, 2 years ago, we went from all of our technicians writing paper invoices. Now we're all paperless. They all have tablets. That was a huge leap, huge investment. But I don't know how we did it before. You know, it's one of, so, you know, some of the other challenges is managing it all, having the right key people in place, and knowing where your weaknesses and strengths are of all your employees. So it's a day-to-day operation.
So as far as your day-to-day, we were talking a little bit earlier about how over the last 17 years, you've, I'm sure, pivoted, I'm sure, but really you stay in your lane. You provide HVAC and refrigeration services for supermarkets and convenience stores, and that's it.
For the most part, any walk-in cooler freezer we typically will install or work on, but the supermarkets and convenience stores is where my heart's at.
Right.
That's where I come from.
Now, how hard is it, though, to like turn away business like
Oh,
that's
it's-
not here, but like here?
Well, when we first started, I mean, I would take any call that come
Sure.
in. You know, you do what you have to do. We've been very fortunate and got a really good customer base of supermarkets, and we're very loyal to them and they're loyal to us. So I don't want to take on new customers and not be able to answer their calls. You know, the big difference in refrigeration is if the freezer goes down at 2 a.m., we get up and go and fix it. It can't wait till the next morning. So that's some of the big challenges. We're 24/7. So,
But then for new companies, they look at the opportunities of any business and they take it, and then it turns out spreading them too thin. And so you said, no, I'm staying in my lane.
well, we've gotten spread too thin more than once. It's easy to do because you hate to say no, and you think, well, that could be a great customer. You know, should I turn them down? And you know, you live and learn. It's a learning curve. We've been on a learning curve. We call it growing pains for 17 years. So.
And it doesn't really go away, does it?
No.
What advice would you give for companies like yours, staying in their lane, trying to figure out that growth path?
You know, first of all, they need to have a good business plan before you start. I see so many people that start a business, have a great idea, but if it doesn't work on paper, it may not work. And luckily I had some very good advice starting out, and you know, my dad come with me, and he's managed my cash flow, which is vital to have somebody that you trust. You don't have to worry about it. Yeah. That's huge. That has been a huge help. I could not have done it without him. So I would just say, know where your costs are, and be careful. Bigger is not always better. We've grown, and then I've said, wait a second, we're not doing things the way I like. Let's stop the growth and get under control what we got.
Right. Kind of put the brakes in some
Put
places.
the brakes on, get control of it, and then move on. And you know, like I said, we've never advertised. It's all been word of mouth. So, and you really, in this industry, people don't look in the yellow pages to fix their freezer in the commercial grocery store.
Right.
That's not how it works. So,
well, I'm glad they find you
yes.
when they need to. Joe Roomsburg, thank you so
Yep.
much for your time.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yep, thank you.
So you're in the military and thinking about getting into the business world. What do you do next? Well, first, you listen to this guy next on Hampton Roads Business Weekly. Welcome back to Hampton Roads Business Weekly. We are here with Michael Schwartz of Knockball Hampton Roads and alum of Regent University. Thank you for being here, Michael.
Glad to be with you.
So one title that we didn't throw in there was also military. You were in the Navy for several years, and then at some point you decided that business might be something that you wanted to go into. When did you start thinking about that transition, and how did you kind of come to the idea of starting a business?
Sure, great question. I actually was pretty proactive in the process. I started about 3.5 years before I knew I was going to retire. And I really was looking for a way out. I wanted to have a successful transition. I knew a lot of people did not have successful transitions and often moved into business or into another career from a position of need. And so I wanted to kind of orchestrate a seamless transition for myself and my family. I was looking at losing about $80,000 in income, so that was enough of a motivator for me to start researching and moving towards making a decision on what I wanted to do next. So my second to last tour in the military was actually in Italy, and I had a lot of flexibility of our time. So my wife and I started looking at businesses that we thought that we might want to run, and really just took off with it and did some research and found a good business to become a part of, and made our transition there.
How did you know that those during those 3 years, or that people that you had talked to before were having bad transitions? Like, what did you talk to them? Was it just hearsay? Like, how did you know that not everyone that transitioned out was having the success that they wanted?
Well, unfortunately, in the military, in a lot of ways today, they're constantly dealing with management of scarcity. So they work the individual to the last moment possible. And I don't necessarily fault that system, but at some point in time, somebody needs to take responsibility for that transition. And again, like I said, I just wanted to be proactive about it, so I just really started looking early on. I was a business major in college before I went into the military, so I kind of had an idea of what I needed to do on the research side. But more than anything, it was just about taking charge of my future, understanding my role as a provider for the family, and that I didn't want my family to suffer as I moved forward, so just being deliberate with those plans.
So did you immediately get into Knockball? Was that the business that you started first, or was it something different at that point?
No, it was actually something different. We actually landed an online fitness company first.
Okay.
One of the issues with being in Italy was it was not so easy to do business internationally. And so when we were looking at what we could do to be successful in that overseas, it was actually an online business. So we had a mineral and supplement line and the ability to help people with diet plans and fitness goals, that stuff. And so we were able to do that very seamlessly over the ocean. And,
Were you able to start that while you're still in the military?
correct.
And so how do you involve your wife into that?
Well, my wife was really the spearhead of it because oftentimes military people, when they're overseas, the spouses are not allowed to work because the host nation doesn't want U.S. Family members taking up the jobs in the community. And so that gave us that flexibility also for Rachel to find some gainful employment and start this business. And so, I just kind of helped with that process and really started growing it.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot more about military spouses and some of the challenges that they have on base, off base, out of state, getting jobs freelance. And so, did you guys have some of that similar challenges as well, or?
Well, we weren't the typical overseas story. We were actually embedded within the Italian community, so there were no Americans anywhere near us. So, a lot of U.S. service members are on bases, and then the exchanges, and they are able to open up some jobs on the base. We didn't have that luxury, which was fine. We adapted just like anybody would, and the power of the internet today really doesn't give you a lot of barriers.
Someone that is maybe 2 years out to the military right now, what would you kind of give them as your tips to make sure that transition goes properly?
I would say it's to understand that the transition is your responsibility. The military and the commands have a responsibility also. They have a mechanism in place to transition you, to kind of give you a good idea of what directions you can go, some help with resumes and job placement and seeking, but really it all falls on our own shoulders. And whether you're single or if you're a married person, you have a responsibility. And again, like I said in the beginning, to operate and not in a position of need while you're really trying to figure out, hey, what is my next career? Just be proactive about it and take the responsibility on board and do your own research, because at the end of the day, you're going to transition out of the military, and the question is, how do you keep your family afloat in a situation, okay?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael.
You're welcome.
And with that, we wrap up another edition of Hampton Roads Business Weekly.
Make sure you like us on Facebook and Twitter, then head over to hrbusinessweekly.com to get more information and watch previous shows.
For Hampton Roads Business Weekly, I'm Zack Miller.
And I'm Cheryl Tan. We'll see you next week.
Hampton Roads Business Weekly, sponsored by Regent University and produced by 13 News Now.